process of devotional service to the Lord in the mode of detachment. Please hear the purport. The quivering quality of material existence, which comes from identification with matter or from thinking oneself under the material influence of philosophical speculation to be God, can be eradicated by the devotional service to the Lord, by the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. As discussed in the first canto, because the application of devotional service to Lord Vasudeva invites pure knowledge, it quickly detaches one from the material conception of life, and thus revives one's normal condition of spiritual existence, even in this life, and frees one from the material winds which cause one to quiver. Only knowledge and devotional service can elevate one toward the path of liberation. The development of knowledge for the purpose of knowing everything without rendering devotional service is considered fruitless labor, and one cannot get the desired result with such labor of love. Lord Vasudeva is pleased by devotional service only, and thus his mercy is realized by association with pure devotees of the Lord. Pure devotees of the Lord are transcendental to all material desires, including the desire for the results of fruitive activities and philosophical speculation. If one wants to acquire the mercy of the Lord, he has to associate with pure devotees. If one wants to acquire the mercy of the Lord, he has to associate with pure devotees. Such association alone can, by degrees, release one from the quivering elements. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnana-anjana-shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa-Ramayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavascha Shri Rupam Sagratam Samadana Raghunatham Vitantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadhutam Parijan Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Samadana Lalita Shri Vishakamitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptakanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Devi Namo Mahabalanyaya Krishna Premanjana Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gaure Krishna Namaha Vanchakapatrudyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paditana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today's verse is actually a very instructive verse. It is the only verse in Bhagavatam where very clearly it is stated how we can actually cross this misconception that we are this body. Misconception of self-identity written here actually refers to the idea that we identify ourselves with the body. And this is the basis for a lot of problems in our life. Most of the problems that we have, whether it is mental, emotional, physical, they all come from this misconception of self-identity. And that is why in the last two verses, you will find that actually Maitreya and Vidura are speaking, and Maitreya picks up this very important point in 3.7.10. In 3.7.10, Maitreya says The living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. So this is the point we must understand. That actually the reason why we are distressed at all in any situation is very frankly because we are not clear about our self-identity. As long as we are not clear who we are and where we come from, what is our purpose of life, there will always be distress. The distress may take any form. It may be in any kind of name, form and combination of things. But ultimately, the distress is coming because we are not clear about our self-identity. That's the first thing. The second thing it is stated nicely in 3.7.10 is that the living entity has no factual background. No factual background means he's like a man who dreams and he sees his head cut off. So many things in this world which are actually considered usually temporary, they become very important to us. So whole life, our minds are dwelling on those things. But frankly speaking, they have no value. At the end of the life, supposing you fight with someone, whole life you have enmity with the person. You cannot not live life without that enmity. But at the end of the day, when you're going to die, what is that value? It's not going to bring you anything. That's why it's, people who we criticize and people who we are envious of, they sleep very well. And we don't sleep very well. So, who is benefiting? So this is all coming because we have no understanding of who we are. No clear conception of self-identity. And that is why we are we are caught up. It is nicely stated here that a man dreams that he sees his head cut off. And of course, when you read the purport, and I'm sure the devotees went through this very nicely in their previous classes, it is very clear that it is a dream. And it's not going to be real. And yet during the dream it becomes so real that we actually think our head is being cut off. But if the head is cut off, then how can we understand it should be dead? And yet it is in the dream. So actually, when we have problems with self-identity, many things cause confusion and bewilderment in our hearts. And this is considered to be the quivering quality of material existence. That's why in the next verse, Yatha Jare Chandra Masaha, you find that this point is brought up again. Maitreya goes deeper into it with Vidura. And he tells him now, the main problem we have is because of the way we see this material world. And such a nice example is given in Bhagavatam, we can never forget this actually. The nice example is, you see the reflection of the moon in water. Supposing you are in the night, you see the moon in the sky, the moon is not quivering. But if you see the moon in the water, naturally any body of water will quiver. Slight wind is there and the water quivers. So this is the stage of our material life. If to the extent that we are fixed in devotional service, to that extent we don't quiver so much. But the moment we are quivering, then what happens is the reflection of the moon appears to quiver also. And so we think that the moon is quivering. And we think that the quality of the moon is to quiver. But actually, frankly speaking, the moon does not quiver. Moon is always stable. But our problem is we have identified the moon through the lenses of the body of water. And therefore we see everything in this world through the lenses of this material senses. And because we are not in touch with our self-identity as servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna and the devotees, we are always in distress. Because when we have this nature of we are this body, then pride, envy and anger, they will always come. Because they're all identifications with what I think belongs to me. That is the whole problem with material world. So that is why it is nicely stated that when we are in difficulty, we should immediately remember 3.7.11. 3.7.11 tells us the difficulty is like the quivering in the water. But our nature is Atma, and we are like the moon. So why are we becoming so disturbed? Because that quivering is affecting our body and our senses, but not our true identity. It will pass. Like everything else in the world, it must come to pass. So why do we hold on to it? This holding on to it causes the material winds, of desire. They cause the body of water, our body to tremble. And then we think that our soul is also affected. But actually they are not affected. If we choose to be affected, we will become affected. But if we choose not to be affected, we will not be affected. That is why Krishna has given us that slight, minute sense of independence. Thank God He gave us minute sense of independence. If He gave us too much, we are always misusing it. We'll be in big trouble. That's why Krishna gave us minute. Because even with minute sense of independence, we are already in so much trouble. Then how much more if we had more independence? You know how much independent thinking we have to the point where we rebel so much against Bhagavatam. We rebel so much against Bhagavad Gita. We hear it every day, but even then our mind rebels. We say, no, this is the standard I want to be, but even then our mind rebels. Because we are exercising our independence in a completely wrong way. It is completely anti-Bhagavatam. And that is why we are always quivering. So now 3.7.12, Bhagavatam tells us that if you want to get rid of this distress, if you want to get rid of these disturbances, then understand one thing, my dear, I say. You please understand that this misconception of self-identity can go, but it goes in two ways. Shanai, it means gradually. It will take some time, and it doesn't just vanish, it diminishes. This is another problem we have. One time I asked my Guru Maharaj, why is it, that we have so much difficulty understanding that devotional service, has a way of gradually eradicating our sinful activities and offenses. Why can't it be immediately? And my Guru Maharaj told me, actually it can be very immediately. Because Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if you chant even once the holy name without any offenses, you will be on pure devotional platform. But the problem is, even when Bhagavatam tells us it gradually goes, we don't want to accept it. We don't want to accept it. Because we think we know better than Krishna. Why can't we just accept that Krishna says it will go, but gradually? Why can't we accept that? We resist it. Because subtly we think we know better than Krishna. Subtly we think that we have come to devotional service, we have a right. We have a right. That because we are doing something, Krishna must do something for us. And that is transactionally. That is not bhakti. That is a transaction. And so therefore we miss the thing. And the material quivering elements, again they come into our lives. That is why we become distressed. So that's why Prabhupada says that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually. But it can only go, the formula is very simple. It can only go by Vasudeva Anukampaya. So nice, such a nice word here, two words. Vasudeva Anukampaya. Anukampaya means mercy, and it is the mercy of Lord Vasudeva. So this mercy, how does it come? It comes through what we call Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena. It comes through the linking process of bhakti. Linking is very nicely stated here. Bhakti Yogena means by linking up. Linking means until we build the bridge, then we are always separated from another island, isn't it? If there's a body of water and there are two islands, the way to link them up is by the bridge. If you don't have the bridge, there is no link. You can only see, but you cannot link. So, bhakti is like that. It is a linking process. But it should not link us to anything and anyone except Krishna. This is very important. That bridge must be built in such a way that the purpose of the building is to only glorify Krishna and to serve his devotees. Then it is considered bhakti. If it is just done because we want something from Krishna, then it may look like devotional service, but it is not pure. And therefore, because it is mixed, we are always in difficulty. Some days we are right, some days we are not. And that is why we are struggling in this world. So this Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena is very important. We can get the mercy of Krishna, but Krishna has a way to give us mercy. He gives it through the process of devotional service. So if you don't take the process of devotional service, you don't get the mercy of Krishna. It's very simple. If you want the mercy of Krishna, then you must take up the process of devotional service. When you take up the devotional service, then even if you are not qualified or qualified, then Krishna, by his causeless mercy, he will somehow protect us. But somehow or another, Prabhupada wanted us to come to the platform of devotional service. So that is the first part. One, we must accept that it is gradual and it diminishes, doesn't go away immediately. And how does this misconception come? It comes by the mercy of Krishna. And how does mercy come? Mercy comes through devotional service. And when this devotional service is practiced, then it is practiced in the mode of detachment. How to understand this mode of detachment? Just look at the first two words after Savaya. Nivritti and Dharmina. Nivritti means to become detached. And dharmena means to become engaged. So actually, what we have to do, devotional service and detachment means we simply move away from matter and become engaged in bhakti. So the path of nivritti doesn't mean we give up everything artificially. It means that we still have engagement, but our engagement is always with Krishna. So this is very important point. So once we understand that, the problem of the quivering quality of existence is because we are always materially attached. We have two things in this world that are always disturbing us, bhagavatam says. And they are the two D's. It's easy to remember. Material dualities and material desires. As long as you have desires which are material, there will be dualities. The dualities do not come when the desires are spiritual. Please remember that. When our desire is spiritual, we are free from dualities automatically. Because we don't hate, we don't love, we don't reject, we don't accept. Everything becomes on the common platform of bhakti. Nothing is hated, nothing is loved, but everything is used in the service of Krishna. That is the way we associate with devotees too. We are not materially attached to devotees, but we always want to be engaged by remembering Bhagavatam through the association of devotees. So this is a very important point we must remember. And one thing we should know is that Prabhupada writes here very nicely, this devotional service of the Lord is actually the mercy of Vasudeva. And the only way to come out of this material conception is actually by falling and surrendering at his lotus feet. In 11.5.33 of Srimad Bhagavatam, this point is very nicely given by, I think it is Brahmaji. Yeah, it should be. Because these two verses are stated by Brahma. I think it is Narada's final instructions to, I can't remember now. But I know these two verses Srila Prabhupada thought was very important. The first verse, the 11.5.33, this explains to us this point about how we can come out of this wrong self-identity and how we can do it. Dheyam sada paribhavagnam abhishtadoham tirthaspadam sivavirinchinutam sharanyam Vrityatiham pranatapala bhavati potam Vande Mahapurushatehi Charanarvindam. So this verse tells us very nicely the point. This verse is talking to actually Krishna. So it is nicely stated, my dear Lord, you are the Mahapurusha. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this whole verse is actually talking about the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu. And what is the benefit of the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu? The lotus feet of Mahaprabhu should become the eternal object of our meditation. So our object of meditation should be nothing else in this world except the lotus feet of Krishna. Why? Because that lotus feet of Krishna can destroy the embarrassing conditions of material life. This embarrassing conditions of material life means our forgetfulness of Krishna. It's embarrassing actually. Imagine you always keep forgetting who your father is. Isn't it an embarrassment? Think about it. You keep forgetting who your mother is. It's an embarrassment, isn't it? You keep telling, I want to be devotee, but you're full of pride, envy, and anger. Isn't that an embarrassment? So actually, when we come to devotional service, that lotus feet of Krishna that we hold on to, he frees us from this embarrassing condition of life. And what does he give us? He freely awards the greatest desire of the soul, which is the attainment of pure love of God. This is so nice point. And when he freely gives this shelter, he gives that shelter in a very free way. That is why it is considered to be causeless mercy. Even if we are not actually deserving, Krishna still is presenting us an opportunity to actually come to the lotus feet of him, to actually attain love of God. Even if we don't desire it so much, like a kind father, he just drags us. How does he drag us? He drags us through circumstances of our life. If you look at each of your life, you will find something compelled us to come to Krishna, isn't it? And even now, something compels us to come to Krishna. This is how Krishna, through his causeless mercy, through circumstances around us, he is bringing us to the whole process. So this is very important point actually. So 11.5.33 tells us that even if the soul doesn't want the attainment of pure devotional service, Krishna gives it anyway. And by doing that, Krishna is so kind that his lotus feet are the shelter of all holy places. All the kirtas, all the saintly authorities, everyone is at his lotus feet. So if you come to Krishna's lotus feet, you get the whole package actually. Even great devatas like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, they are there. And Krishna is so kind. We're talking about Vasudevanu. Krishna is so kind that he willingly protects all those who simply bow to him with respect. Just bow to him. That's all they have to do. In other words, Pranatapala, one who simply offers respects to you. That's the word towards synonym. If you just offer respects to Krishna, what does he do? He willingly protects anyone who bows to him. It's not like he grudgingly protects someone. What to do? I have to do it, right? I'm the Supreme Personality of God. No, he willingly does it. We always grudgingly do everything, isn't it? We do it half-heartedly. Sometimes we do it because we have no choice. Everyone is watching us. We are devotees, isn't it? Once you wear dhoti kurta, you realize, whether you like it or not, you can't walk into the pub, isn't it? Grudgingly, you have to do it, isn't it? You wear dhoti kurta and put tilak, you can't walk into a restaurant, isn't it? Grudgingly, you can't. You can't wear this and go and watch a movie in the cinema. You're finished. So that grudge, we do it grudgingly sometimes. What to do? We are here. Everybody is watching us. But Krishna does nothing with grudge. Why? Because he's beyond material nature. Material nature means grudges. Always we have some grudge. Either we do something grudgingly, or we don't like someone and we have to like them grudgingly also. But Krishna has no grudge in his heart. And the pure devotees have no grudge in their hearts. They are just mirrors of Krishna. So no matter how many times we are in an embarrassing situation, Krishna willingly protects anyone. Just we have to do one thing. Just bow to him with respect. That's all. Nothing else. In fact, frankly speaking, in Bhagavatam, Bali Maharaj did not bow. He was bound. He could not bow. But he bowed in his mind. And even bowing in his mind, Krishna accepted it. Just see. That Brahmana, he had nothing to offer Krishna. But he just made that sweet rice. And he thought that he had to test it. And it was all in his mind. But Krishna accepted it. Sudama had nothing. But whatever he had, Krishna accepted it. Brahmaji prayed very hard to Krishna because he had no knowledge to actually create this material nature. But Krishna, he didn't matter. Krishna said, whatever you've asked before. Sometimes we get tired of people. How many times does I repeat to you? Krishna told Brahma, whatever you've asked before. But doesn't matter, I'll give it to you again. This is Krishna. So this is actually the mercy of Vasudeva. And that is why Brahmaji concludes here that it is only his lotus feet which is the suitable boat for crossing this ocean of material birth and death. And even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, they are seeking shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. So that is why the only way to stop this material attachment is by the process of nivritti. You see, nivritti is very important. Without nivritti, without having this, what we call the path of detachment, it is very difficult for us to come out. So sometimes, we perform devotional service with a lot of attachment. We have left the attachments of material world, but we come here and we bring them here. There are some very simple examples. I do a service. I am preaching to someone. Suddenly I think I own the person. I don't own anything. I came here because, I want to disown everything. But then when I start preaching, I think that this is my congregation. And then when I start preaching to people, I think they belong to me. So if someone else goes to talk to that person, we say, no, it's not correct. How can you do that? Sometimes we have a service. I'm the one doing it. Supposing suddenly somebody comes and does the service, we're very upset. No, why? Because the service belongs to me. When did that happen? How did that happen? We can't explain that. But no, it's now my service. So even in material world, we are already so caught up. Then in spiritual world, we think that we only know how to do it. That's the other problem. We are so attached to our devotional service because we think only I know how to do this service perfectly. You don't know how to do it. If Prabhupada had that mood, we would never have this society today. Because only Prabhupada could perfectly do anything when his disciples were coming. Nobody could perfectly do anything. We must learn through mistakes. And we must learn by detaching ourselves and allowing devotees to go through the spectrum of learning a service. Doesn't mean it will be perfect. And it doesn't mean we only know the standard of perfection. Who are we? No, you have to do it this way. Who are you? Who are you to say that? It doesn't mean that we are sitting in one corner and not commenting on anything, that we are not commenting in our hearts. In our hearts, we may be saying all these things, but outside, externally, we may look very humble. Even then, Krishna catches. Don't think you can fool Jagannath. Even then, Krishna will catch this attachment, subtle attachment to what we think is devotional service. But it's not devotional service. This is not devotional service. That is why it is very nicely stated in 3.5.40 of Srimad Bhagavatam. The Devakinandan, they chant very nicely to Krishna this prayer. Dhata yadasmin bhavaisha jivas tapa drayena bihata nashanma alman labhante bhagavan savandri chayam savidyam atha ashrayema. The translation is very beautiful. They call Krishna as O Father. So nice, huh? They say, O Father, O Lord, O Personality of Godhead. The living entities in this material world can never have any happiness because they are overwhelmed by the three kinds of misery. Therefore, they take shelter of the shade of your lotus feet, which are full of knowledge, and we also take shelter of them. Why is this verse relevant here? Because devotional service, Prabhupada says, is not a sentiment. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, when you come to Vasudeva, you get pure knowledge. Pure knowledge is the only way to come out of detachment. Until we have the pure knowledge that Bhagavatam gives us that we are not this body, we will never come out of this attachment. We will come to the temple, but we will carry this baggage also with us. And that is why it becomes very difficult for us to do anything. That's why when we study 3.5.40, 3.5.40 should be studied with 3.5.13, just before that. These two verses go very well. Because in 3.5.40, the Devatas are talking about how to come out of material misery by taking the shade of the lotus feet of Krishna. And in 3.5.13, they say what happens when you take the shade of the lotus feet of Krishna. And in 3.5.13, they say, Shasa Shraddhadanasya Vivardhamana Viraktimanyatra Karoti Kumsaha Hare Padanus Smriti Nivritasya Samasta Dukkha See the word Dante. Dante means execute, and Ashi means without delay. But see the translation. If one is anxious to engage constantly in hearing about Krishna through Krishna Katha, then what does Krishna do? Krishna will gradually increase your indifference towards all other things. See? It is Krishna who will increase your indifference. What does indifference mean? Indifference means that we become detached. Whatever comes, we take it that Krishna wants. So this is the verse that tells us how to increase this indifference. This indifference will come when we engage constantly in doing what? In hearing about Krishna. That's why Prabhupada instituted Bhagavatam programs, so that we can hear about Krishna. And Bhagavatam is very special. That's why, when we chant in the morning, the first two shlokas, we say that those who are actually regularly hearing, and not hearing any other scripture, this Bhagavatam actually. And when we regularly hear Bhagavatam and serve the pure devotee, because the pure devotee is Srila Prabhupada. If we serve Prabhupada by hearing Bhagavatam, then what happens? Then this great lotus feet of Krishna, if we constantly remember the lotus feet of Krishna, then indifference towards all other things, that means material things, they will all go. And Prabhupada translates that you will achieve transcendental bliss by vanquishing all your miseries without delay. Without delay. So this is a very important point we should remember actually. And why is it that it goes without delay? Because Prabhupada writes in the purport that when we come to Krishna in this way, then that mercy of Krishna also gives us the potency of spiritual knowledge. It is Bhagavad Gita tells us very clearly that bhakti is a science. And that's why when we perform devotional service, pure knowledge is actually manifest. Vasudeva Bhagavati. We know that, right? That famous verse of Vasudeva Bhagavati in the first canto, it tells us that when you take up devotional service, two things automatically come. One is, of course, renunciation and detachment, and the other is knowledge. So actually, it is not that we artificially run after knowledge, but that knowledge will automatically come just by Krishna's mercy. This is very important. That is why Krishna says in 10.10 of Bhagavad Gita, Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Preeti Purvaka. Preeti means when we become dear to Krishna and Krishna becomes dear to us, then what happens? Then Krishna is the one who gives us the intelligence to come to Him. This intelligence can only come through the mercy of Krishna. No matter how much we read Bhagavatam using just our heads, it's not going to help us. That is why it is stated very clearly that only through devotional service does pure knowledge come. But Prabhu's and Mataji's, this pure knowledge itself is very powerful. And this pure knowledge that comes, it means something. What does Prabhupada mean by the word pure knowledge? When you study Prabhupada's lectures, in one lecture, I think it is in Bombay, early years, maybe, no, not so early, 1973-74. I can give you the exact one date, I just noted it down. Prabhupada actually defines what pure knowledge means in that lecture. And Prabhupada said there that one cannot be a bhakti yogi without jnana and vairagya. Very important. Sometimes we think bhakti is just a sentiment, but Prabhupada makes it clear, it's not sentiment. You cannot take up devotional service without detachment. That's the point of this verse. There must be vairagya. Vairagya is detachment from matter by using matter for Krishna. That is detachment. Not running away from matter, but using it for Krishna. Like this Gauranga center is being used for Krishna. Otherwise, what would have happened previously is that all of the persons who own this building, they came together on Sunday mornings like this to play carom. So this whole place, if you came in 10 years, 15 years ago, they would have about 10 tables, and on each of the tables there will be carom balls. They'll all be playing that carom. If you go to London on Sundays, they go to the bingo halls and they play bingo. But it's the same place. But today, 10, 15 years later, if those same people saw us, I think they will faint. Because here suddenly Jagannath has manifested and this whole place has been turned. So that is actually detachment. And detachment and knowledge come together. And Prabhupada says, this bhakti is not a sentimental thing. It is based on pure knowledge. Please remember this. It is based on pure knowledge. That's why Prabhupada told us to study his books. Until you study his books and then put them into practice, it's very hard to understand what bhakti is. Otherwise, bhakti will just be a sentiment. And then Prabhupada defines pure knowledge. Prabhupada says pure knowledge means, I do not belong to this material world. What a nice point. Prabhupada says pure knowledge means, I do not belong to this material world. I am spirit soul. Aham Brahmasmi. That's first point. Then second point, Prabhupada says, therefore, my business is to serve the Supreme Brahman, who is Krishna. So, the starting point is, I don't belong to this world. This is a very important point. We are in this world, but we don't belong to this world. We actually belong to the spirit world. This is the whole reason why we are praying. That's why Prabhupada brings this up. All your problems that you have, which cause you distress, is because of this. We still think we belong to this material world. We think everything connected to us belongs to us, and therefore we belong to the material world. You see the extensions? So that's the first point. Second point is, I don't belong to this material world because my business is to serve Krishna. And then after we understand that our business is to serve Krishna, then we understand why we serve Krishna. Because He is Param Brahman, Param Dham. He is the Supreme. This is a very important point. He is Param Brahman. He is Param Dham. He is Pavitram Paramam Bhavan. This is what Arjuna declared also. And that's why Prabhupada says in that lecture, that actually, why is it that Arjuna could surrender to Krishna? Arjuna could surrender to Krishna because he realized who Krishna was. This is very important. If we don't realize who Krishna is, then we will not take this up. So please remember, pure knowledge is not just 3 words Prabhupada wrote there. It actually means something. And that is what he has given. So when we understand gradually that we don't belong to this world, and then we take up devotional service, that is the meaning of Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena, and that is the meaning of Nivritti Dharmena. That is how devotional service should be performed. It's a very important point for us to know. And when we perform devotional service in that way, then the transcendental knowledge, it actually acts in our hearts. And this transcendental knowledge is very powerful. It is not like material knowledge. In the 2nd canto, 3rd chapter, 12 verse, 2, 3, 12, anytime anyone asks you, what is the impact of transcendental knowledge, just remember this verse. very important verse. Jnanam yada pratinivritta gunomi chakram atma prasada udayatra guneshiva sangaha kaivalya sammata pataspata bhakti yogaha ko nivrito harikata suratim nakurya. The translation is very beautiful. It is nicely stated by Shukadeva Goswami. This transcendental knowledge means it must be in relation to the Supreme Lord Hari. It must be connected to Krishna. And when this knowledge comes, what happens? There is a complete suspension of the waves and whirlpools of the material worlds. So nice, huh? Gunodmi Chakram. This whole whirlpool of material life, it is suspended by transcendental knowledge. See the word suspended. Huh? Suspended means it's not gone. It is suspended. As long as you are in this material world, you have to suspend these miseries. The moment you stop being with devotional service, the linking process is broken, then the quivering qualities. It will continue until you die. There is no other way. That's why you suspend it. So Krishna consciousness suspends the waves and whirlpools of this material modes. In other words, material modes do not touch us when we take up seriously devotional service on the platform of transcendental knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. All these will make us very firm. They will not let us get caught up in the whirlpool. And when you do this transcendental knowledge, when you study Srila Prabhupada's books, something happens. This knowledge is self-satisfying, Atma Prasada. Atma Prasada means we don't need something else to make us satisfied. Just sitting with Srila Prabhupada's books, chanting Krishna's names, and just performing our services to Krishna in the nice association of devotees, it is very self-satisfying. We don't need anything else. Frankly, Prabhupada is so pure, if you just sit down and study his books, that itself is enough actually. It increases our faith just by studying Prabhupada's books. So this knowledge is self-satisfying. Why? Because it is free from material attachment. It is free from material attachment. This whole Bhagavatam, Prabhu's Mataji, has not a tinge of matter in it. Not a tinge. Everything in Bhagavatam is transcendently approved by the authorities. Therefore, it is nicely stated by Shukadeva Goswami, who can fail to be attracted to such knowledge? Isn't it true? While you are here at 7:30 in the morning, how sweet Bhagavatam is. At this moment, do you feel like you want to run out? Hopefully not. You still feel like you want to hear Bhagavatam, isn't it? So nice, it is so sweet. We don't know why it is sweet, but it is sweet. Because it is Atma Prasad. It is satisfying us. It is satisfying us. Even the children, they may not know what is happening in Bhagavatam, but their souls are very old. Their souls are ancient. So even when children are around and they are hearing something from Bhagavatam, it is actually touching their consciousness. So that's why I like, that Shamsundar is here and the children are here. Because you may think that, they are getting so much noise, but no, they are being purified. They are being purified. It should bring a smile to our face that this Bhagavatam is purifying the hearts of a new generation of children. This is the important thing. So this is about, he's saying something. He's saying, so this is very important. Please understand what knowledge is. Pure knowledge means I don't belong to this world. I belong to Krishna. Because I am spirit soul. And then we must understand why Arjuna agreed to serve Krishna. Because he accepted this conclusion. And that is why Arjuna received pure knowledge. And that is why Bhagavad Gita is pure knowledge. But Prabhupada writes in the purport that if after we amass all the knowledge in the world, but that knowledge has nothing to do with devotional service, then it is fruitless labor of love. Fruitless labor of love, it's like a slap on your face, isn't it? In the material world, you run after someone who you like, but the person doesn't like you. It's a fruitless labor of love. You think I love you, but it's so laborious, and when you get that slap, then you wake up and realize, oh, what am I doing? That is what is happening in this material world. Prabhupada used to quote this nice story. He said there was one boatman, and a scholar who used to live in the village. He came to the banks of the river, and he met his old friend who is now a boatman. He said, bring me across to the village. I want to see them. After so many years, I've come back and I'm a scholar. So the boatman said, I'm very happy, my friend. Come. So he got on board and the other passengers were there. And the boatman was rowing. So the scholar, he studied so much. So he thought, let me ask the boatman whether he knows all the things I've studied. That's the problem with material knowledge, right? We become very proud of it. So he said, my friend, you're rowing on the boat all the time. Do you understand the quality of water? Do you understand how water is composed? And the boatman said, no, actually I don't understand. So he said, my God, 20% of your life is just wasted. Then he said, look around you, the flora and the fauna is there. You see all the flora and fauna around you. Do you understand the botany and what the plants are, what are the names of the flowers and everything? He said, no, my friend, I'm just rowing the boat, making sure you cross. He said, another 20% of your life is gone. So he said, all right. Then he said, as you're rowing, you're in open nature. You see the movement of the stars in the evening and in the morning, the sun. He said, no, I have no knowledge of that. I just row the boat. He said, like this, another 20% of your life, 60% of your life, my dear friend, has just gone. And suddenly at that moment, the weather changed. And within a few moments, like, in Singapore, suddenly the rain came. And the storm made the boat so choppy, there was only a matter of time, before the boat would be bowled over. At that point of time, all the passengers got up. No one had said anything, but everybody just started jumping into the water and swimming straight forward. Because the boat has sprung a leak. All except the scholar. The scholar had lost his confidence. And the boatman calmly looked at the scholar and said, my friend, I hope with all the knowledge that you have studied, you also have studied how to swim. And the scholar looked at his friend and said, that's the only thing they never taught me. I don't know how to swim. And the boatman smilingly told him, then 100% of your life is gone. 100% of your life is gone. And this is why Prabhupada is telling us in this purport, that actually, when we come to devotional service, if we study we may be very smart in many material things in this world, but if we miss the point of bhagavatam, and if we don't act on it, then we are like the scholar. We have so much knowledge, but we have never translated it into action. What is the point? What is the point of knowing so many shlokas, chanting it very nicely, pakka pronunciation, and then when the boat is going to go down, you don't know how to swim? What is the point? So Prabhupada has made this point very nicely actually. So please, we must remember one thing. Undertaking knowledge means it must always be the linking process to Krishna. Do not study Srimad Bhagavatam because it is a means of becoming scholarly. If you do that with Bhagavatam, then what happens is, we just approach Krishna from an intellectual point. But Bhagavatam is very clear. We have to approach it with bhakti. When we approach it with bhakti, then automatically the knowledge comes. Devotees are also very intellectual. If you ask any devotee who is practicing Krishna consciousness, they can scientifically explain to you this devotional process. They won't say, Prabhu, I don't know what is in there, but I just know you just chant, some tears will come to my eyes. They will not talk like that. They will give you nice points. That's how Prabhupada introduced Krishna consciousness to the world actually. And now we come to the last component. The last component is the most important component. The most important component is mercy of Krishna. We understand the linking process of bhakti is very important. We understand the point of detachment and indifference, how bhakti increases it automatically, and how we must also make the endeavor. But the real component that holds everything together is actually the mercy of Krishna. And this mercy of Krishna is so powerful, but Prabhupada says this mercy of Krishna can be only realized with the association of pure devotees. So, Prabhupada has a two-step process here. In the verse, Maitreya doesn't talk about pure devotees. Right? He just says you get the mercy of Krishna. But as a founder Acharya, and in the line of the Sampradaya, Srila Prabhupada says something very important. Now we know mercy of Krishna is there. But the real question is, how do you get the mercy of Krishna? Do you just get it by unilaterally performing devotional service? Without any guidance, without any association? No. Prabhupada says one can only get mercy of the Lord. The word Prabhupada uses in purport, if I'm not wrong, is that you can only realize the mercy of Krishna by association with devotees. Isn't it true? The word is realize. Why is it important to realize the mercy of Krishna? This is a very important point. Why does Prabhupada use the word realize? He could have just said, you just get the mercy of Krishna through the mercy of devotees. But why does he use the word realize? The word realize is very important because if you don't realize that the mercy of the Lord is coming through the pure devotees, then what will happen is we will take the pure devotees for granted. We will not realize the value of the Lord and the value of the devotees. Very, very important. And if we cannot value this mercy, then what will happen is we will become what we call very unfortunate. Unfortunate. And that is a description of Bhagavatam. If you take up devotional service and you don't realize the value and mercy of Jagannath and his pure devotees, then we are considered unfortunate. And when we don't realize that mercy is coming from the pure devotees, it's very easy for us not to develop a mood of gratitude. That's why the word realize is very important here. And that's why we should keep it in mind. In 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we always read 15th chapter. In the last verses of all chapters of Bhagavad Gita are very important. And so are their purports. If you read the last verse purport, Prabhupada says very nicely the effect of performing devotional service in the association of pure devotees. It's very important. While one is performing devotional service in the association of pure devotees, do you see it there? Is it there? Do you see it? Okay. While one is performing devotional service in the association of pure devotees in full Krishna consciousness, see what Prabhupada says. There are certain things which require to be vanquished altogether. In other words, we must make some effort when we actually approach a pure devotee. The most important thing one has to surmount is weakness of the heart. This is the point that Prabhupada is bringing up. Bhaktivinoda Thakur extensively talks about the weakness of the heart in this Harinam Chintamani. And Prabhupada explains it very nicely. What is this weakness of the heart? The first fall down is caused by a desire to lord it over material nature. This is the reason, this is the thing that breaks the bridge between us and Krishna. This is why the mercy is not flowing, so to speak. Because we lord it over material nature. And when we come to the center, we lord it also. We think we are kings. We are not submissive to Krishna. We want things our way. We want to, in other words, be proprietors. This is weakness of the heart, actually. And when that happens, we give up the transcendental loving service of Krishna. The second weakness of the heart, Prabhupada says, is that one increases the propensity to lord it over material nature. He becomes attached to the material nature. And he's not only attached to it, he wants to possess it. He wants to possess it. But nothing belongs to us. Even the sharir will not follow us after we die. Even sharir is left here, actually. Think about it. Your sharir is either buried or it is burnt. That's it. It doesn't follow the soul. So, people cannot follow you. Some people can follow you to the funeral pyre. But they can't jump in the funeral pyre with you. They won't. Even if you pay them, they won't. Even if they love you very much, they won't. They'll stand outside. And in the funeral pyre, even your body will not follow you. Your body will stay here. And yet, our weakness of the heart that prevents us from getting the association of pure devotees is that we think we lord over everything. So Prabhupada writes this very important purport to say, the problems of material existence are due to the weaknesses of the heart. That is our problem, actually. And that is why it's so difficult for us to associate with pure devotees. Because we are still attached to this material world. But when we associate with pure devotees, then it becomes very powerful. That is why the word attachment, nivritti and dharmena are important in this verse. They not only mean that we perform bhakti, but they also mean that we somehow or another become attached to the association of pure devotees. We must develop attachment, but attachment to the pure devotees. And it is stated, it is found in Bhagavatam 3:25-20. You see 3:25-20. It's very nicely stated. Bhagavatam makes it very clear there. And Prabhupada's purport is just amazing in that verse. In that verse, very nicely it is stated, every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door for liberation. Just imagine. So beautiful. Now see what Prabhupada says in the purport. Here it is clearly stated that attachment for one thing is the cause of bondage in conditioned life. And the same attachment, when applied to something else, opens the door for liberation. So Prabhupada is very practical. What does he say in the next line? Attachment cannot be killed. It has simply to be transferred. So nice. Don't kill your attachment. transfer it. Attachment for material things is called material consciousness. And attachment for Krishna or his devotees is called Krishna consciousness. And one last line. This one you should bold it and put it somewhere. Consciousness is therefore the platform of attachment. Consciousness is the platform of attachment. In other words, how we attach with someone depends on our consciousness. What we are attached to depends on our consciousness. And consciousness means our attitude. Attitude is a cousin of consciousness. Your consciousness is driven by your attitude. If your attitude is devotional, your consciousness is devotional. If your attitude is critical, your consciousness is critical. If your attitude is that you want to bow before Krishna, your consciousness is that you always bow before Krishna. You see the link between attitude and consciousness? So therefore, when we want to become attached to Krishna, that attachment is important. But even more important than that, Prabhupada says in this purport, is attachment to the pure devotees. We must increase this attachment to our spiritual masters, attachment to Srila Prabhupada, and always attachment to the service of the devotees around us. We don't become attached to the devotee, then it becomes eventually a material friendship. But we become attached to the service of what we can do for the devotee. That becomes important. Otherwise, then two devotees, will look like they're devotees, but their friendship will be destroyed because there is social intercourse. Bhutanam yat itaha kalihi. The social intercourse will come between the two devotees, and then it will cause dissension. But if we are serving each other, then there is no dissension. No dissension. And that is why after 3:25:20, the full effect of association of devotees is given in 3:25:25, the famous verse. Satam prasanga mama virya samvido bhavanti hrikarna rasayana kataha tajoshanat ashwapavardhavatmani shraddharati bhakti anukramishyati. See the effect of the association of devotees. It's so nicely given here actually. It is nicely stated that when we are in the association of pure devotees, whatever we discuss about Krishna is very easy. You can test this. If you are in the association of anyone who is only discussing Krishna, you will find two things happening. In your heart, you become very pleased. Second, you become very satisfied. You won't run around. And it will be very satisfying to your heart and to your ear. And when you cultivate this knowledge in the association of pure devotees, you will become advanced on the path of liberation. And when we become advanced on the path of liberation, we are freed from material modes of nature. And our attraction for Krishna becomes fixed. Then only our devotional service actually begins. Some people think, oh my God, that means up till then no devotional service? It's true. Up till then, the devotional service is all what we call khichdi. It's all mixed here and there. That is why Prabhupada is saying so importantly that you must take association of the pure. Sometimes people say, how do we develop distaste then for material life? Very easy. Just look at the next verse. This is the other secret to bhagavatam. Whenever you find one very important verse, like 4:34 for example, tad viti pranipatena. If you want to know something more about that very important verse, look to the next verse. Same thing here. When you want to understand how to get this association, what happens, look at 3:25:26. And in 3:25:26, very nicely it is stated, if you are consciously engaged in devotional service in the association of devotees, is there the word pure? In translation? No. See? So Prabhupada is reminding us, the person next to you could be a pure devotee. That's what he's telling us. Don't say, oh, I have to leave Goranga Center because you know why? No pure devotees. Everybody is full of fault. These two verses, 3:25:25 says, I need to go somewhere, to sit down with sadhus. Because here there are no sadhus. But it is stated here that if you are in the association of devotees, you will gain distaste for self-gratification. Both in this world and the next. How powerful it is. Why? You constantly think about the activities of the Lord. So actually, purity of a devotee is defined by how much he or she causes you to think about Krishna. Isn't that so? Isn't it? up to the point that the devotee always makes you remember Krishna. What is wrong in saying that this devotee is purity? What is wrong with that? Why can't we see that in persons? It's because of entities. So then the verse concludes by saying the process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. And in this path, look at it. When you are situated on the path of devotional service, you are able to control the mind. So don't artificially try to control the mind. Mind will control you. But if you try to control, if you try to do devotional service in service of devotees, if your whole attitude to devotees changes, and you're very accepting of them, you learn from everyone. My Guru Maharaj always said, you can learn from anybody. Anyone, because everyone has purity in them. Everyone has purity in them. Just when they teach you something about Krishna, you take that purity. That's all. You ignore everything else. Just take that purity. What is wrong? In that way, you're always associating with pure devotees. See the point? If you take the purity from someone who makes you remember Krishna, then you're always associating with pure devotees. But if you wait for that one pure devotee with 64 transcendental qualities to come, then good luck. You will be Yamaraj, and then nothing else will happen. Nothing else will happen. So it's very important in conclusion to realize that this verse is so important. It's such a simple verse, but hopefully, by the power of Prabhupada ends the purport very nicely. Prabhupada ends the purport just by making one very important thing. Such association alone can by degrees release one from the quivering elements. In other words, Prabhupada ends emphatically by saying, you need devotional service, but you need it through the mercy of the devotees. Just 5 minutes, I want to remember King Prataparudra. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, King Prataparudra was a very great king in those days. And he was very devotional in his attitude. But he was a king, But he had only one desire. Even though he was much loved and revered by his citizens, even though he was considered a very powerful king, he considered himself just a caretaker. Very nice mood. He was just a caretaker. And he thought to himself that my only desire is somehow I must take darshan of Mahaprabhu. And I want Mahaprabhu's lotus feet. And I just pray that he accepts me and gives me his causeless mercy. So, as a king, he could have foolishly summoned Mahaprabhu to the palace. He could have. But his mood was that he was very humble. He thought that I'm not very qualified to approach Mahaprabhu, but I will ask the permission of the devotees to approach him. See, this is Prataparudra. Even though he was so advanced, he felt that I need the blessings of devotees. So he went to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and he put his petition before Bhattacharya. And he wrote a very nice petition. And Bhattacharya brought his petition to Mahaprabhu and said, there is a nice king, Prataparudra, and he has written that he is very anxious to see you and to take your mercy. And Mahaprabhu turned to him and said, I do not want to deal with kings, because kings are not renounced by nature. And as a sannyasi, it is so dangerous to meet a king. It is as dangerous to meet a king as it is dangerous for a sannyasi to meet a woman. Then at that moment, Bhattacharya tried again. He said, my dear Lord, what you have said is correct, but this king is not an ordinary king. He is a great devotee of the Lord. But Mahaprabhu refuted this argument. He said that yes, you may say that the king is a great devotee, but kings are considered like venomous snakes. And they may look very nice, but when they bite, it is poisonous. Then Mahaprabhu became upset. He turned to Bhattacharya and said, if you again bring up this topic, right, then I'm not going to be here. And you must never bring it up, otherwise I'm going to leave your company. So Bhattacharya was very shocked. And so what he did was, he told the king, he pacified him. He said, Mahaprabhu will give mercy, just wait for a while. Then at that time, Ramananda Rai, another great devotee, he came to see Mahaprabhu, because Mahaprabhu was in Puri. Ramananda Rai used to be under the employ of King Prataparudra. But one day Ramananda Rai went to the king and said, my dear king, I want to retire because now I want to devote my time, full time, to Mahaprabhu. The king never made noise. In fact, the king gave him full pension. What a nice employer. Eh? The king gave him full pension and told him, please go and work for Mahaprabhu now. But just ask Mahaprabhu if I can have his mercy. So Ramananda Rai, when now he met Mahaprabhu, he said, I can now work full time with you. And Mahaprabhu said, how is it possible? Ramananda Rai thought this is the time to recommend, again. So he said, it is possible because of the pure heartedness of King Prataparudra. The moment Mahaprabhu heard that, he said, oh, that's very nice. But he was not very happy. And then Raman Rai said, would you please give him audience? And Mahaprabhu turned around and said, actually, you know what, Raman Rai, by Prataparudra associating with you, he's already becoming purified. Mahaprabhu was just doing this, just couldn't get him in the spot. He said, why you come to me? He has come to you, that's enough. This is the principle that Prabhupada is saying. Just come to him, come to the devotee, and somehow it will happen. So Raman Rai went back to the king and said, I humbly request you to be patient. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya tried 2 times, right? Cannot. Sent a petition, not possible. Raman Rai Prabhu also tried, and it couldn't happen. But the king did not lament. He was determined. He was very determined. So he said, now there must be some way something will happen. And true enough, Bhattacharya told him, don't worry, it will come. He was very astonished by the king's determination. He said, now Rath Yatra is coming. And at that time, Mahaprabhu will come. You come and see him, take darshan, and I pray that he will also give you mercy. So when the Jagannath Rath Yatra came, the king, he came before Jagannath and he asked for a broom. And he swept the floor so that Jagannath can walk. Today, like I told you before, today it's not a matter of sweeping because it is dirty. Today when you sweep your VIP. But when it started, it was not like that. It was how can the king be considered to be a menial person. Now Chaitanya Charitamrita tells us when Mahaprabhu saw the king performing menial service, actually his heart started melting. And who suggested this to him? It was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. See the association of pure devotees, how subtly it brings us closer and closer and closer to the mercy of Krishna. But then at that point, he never said anything. Then Mahaprabhu fell down in ecstasy. And at that point, the king immediately came and put him on the lap. When Mahaprabhu woke up, when he saw who had carried him, he just stood up and said, oh, today I have been actually contaminated by a king. And actually, Prataparudra, was not angry. Chaitanya Charitamrita said he was actually very afraid. He became very scared. This is the mood of a devotee. He was not offended, but actually he felt very afraid, fearful that he would lose the mercy of Mahaprabhu. So the chariot festival passed, and again he could not get his mercy. But then now Nityananda Prabhu himself went to Mahaprabhu and talked about Prataparudra. And Mahaprabhu said, listen Nityananda Prabhu, if you talk about him one more time, I am leaving Puri. Can you imagine that? Transcendently stubborn. Then Nityananda Prabhu negotiated and said, okay fine, we don't want to give him audience, give him something at least. So he took a cloth and gave it. Nityananda Prabhu gave it to Prataparudra, and Prataparudra thought, this cloth is as good as Mahaprabhu, I'm very happy. But still he wanted Mahaprabhu's mercy. And so now Mahaprabhu and everybody stayed in the grounds of the gardens of the king after Rath Yatra. And the king would look at them and be so happy, but he was not allowed to come before Mahaprabhu. Then Bhattacharya then suggested again, never give up, these pure devotees never give up. He said then, why don't you send your son to see? And Mahaprabhu agreed, okay, I don't want to see the king, but I can see his son. At least his son is innocent, not like the father. Can you imagine that? And Mahaprabhu said that even one drop of liquor in a pot of milk spoils the whole milk. So I don't want to see Prataparudra. So Prataparudra heard this, but he said, never mind. Bhattacharya said, send my son. So he sent the son. Mahaprabhu saw the son and remembered Krishna. And he embraced the son that he would embrace Krishna. And when Prataparudra heard that his son was embraced by Mahaprabhu, as a father you normally embrace your children. That day he embraced him double. Because he said embracing him is like embracing Mahaprabhu. Why? Because of the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. But still he could not see him. So then one fine day, there was again, the Rath Yatra festival continued. And when Mahaprabhu came to dance before Jagannath, and all the parties were there, they were all dancing, and Mahaprabhu divided everyone into 7 groups. And in each of the 7 groups, right, he put the best singers and the best mridanga and kartal players. And everybody saw Mahaprabhu at the front. But only 2 people could see that Mahaprabhu manifested himself in every single one of that group. Who were the 2? Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and King Prataparudra. Mahaprabhu was already giving him mercy. And then at that point, the others only see one Mahaprabhu. So Srivas Thakur and Harichandran Thakur, they were trying to push forward. You know, like sometimes we push, right? Like rowdies, we push forward. And they wanted to take darshan. So what happened was, Harichandan started, Harichandan started touching Srivas Thakur. And Srivas Thakur got a bit upset. So what he did was he turned around and he slapped Harichandan. He just slapped him. And when he slapped him, actually he got also very upset. So we should be prepared. In Rath Yatra sometimes devotees may slap us. But don't feel anything. Because at that point of time, when they started becoming upset, do you know what Pratap said? He told both of them, actually you all are so fortunate that at least you've got the slap of a great devotee. This was Pratap Parudra's mood actually. And finally, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya told him, I think today you have a chance. When he's very tired, they will go to the gardens and they will sit there. And at that time, Mahaprabhu wants someone to massage his feet. Change your kingly garb and wear some beggar garb and go and sit down with him. And at that point of time, when you sit down with him, then you just massage his feet. Same thing as Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said happened. And Mahaprabhu sat down in the garden very tired. And at that point of time, as he was very tired, the king approached him. And in a meek and humble voice, he said, may I massage your feet? Mahaprabhu's eyes were closed, so he couldn't see who the king was. But of course, Mahaprabhu knew who he was in the heart. But with so much of purity of the pure devotees, Mahaprabhu had to resist. He couldn't resist anymore. So he said, just whoever you are, just massage my feet. And he started massaging his feet. And he started chanting Srimad Bhagavatam. And the moment he started chanting Gopi Geet, he started chanting, but one verse woke up. One particular verse really touched Mahaprabhu's heart. Tavagatabritam tapta jivanam kavividitam kalmashapraham shravana mangalam shrimadakatam bhuviganantiye bhuvirajana. This is the verse that touched his heart. Now it's 10:31, 9, I think it's the 9th verse. And in that verse, it is so nicely stated that the nectar of any words, that come from Krishna, the description of his pastimes, they are like tapta jivanam. They relieve the sufferings of the soul in the world. And that was Pratap Parudra's prayer. Relieve the pain in my heart, my Lord, so that I can take your association. And at that point of time, Mahaprabhu said so nice point. He got up and he said, you have given me invaluable gems. What can I give you? I have nothing to give you. Therefore, I am simply embracing you. And Mahaprabhu embraced Pratap Parudra. He embraced him. And why did Pratap Parudra get this wonderful embrace of Mahaprabhu? Because of the association of pure devotees. One after the other. They never give up. And that's why the pure devotees, we must seek them. We may give up on them, but they never give up on us. And we must also change our attitude that we should never give up on anyone else. Krishna consciousness is so broad-hearted, so broad-minded, so kind, that we also must be touched by its purity. Never give up on anyone. Never close the door for anyone. Because bhakti is available for everyone. Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and all the acharyas coming from Mahaprabhu, they broke that vault and opened it up so that the holy name can be distributed freely, so that bhakti should be distributed freely. If we do that, then Shanai Tirodatte Shanai Iha. Gradually, the misconception of self-identity, by the mercy of the pure devotees, it will go. Vratraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Gurudev ki, I go to. Maybe I can take one question? Yes, Sudha.
Prabhu, this word, Tirodatte Shanai, in today's verse, we saw that the misconception of self-identity is gradually diminished. And he also quoted from the 5th chapter of the 3rd canto, where the indifference is also gradually developed by meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord. So Prabhu, it seems like Vidya and Vairagya and so many of Anartha Vivriti is all gradual. So in Bhakti, then what is immediate? When Bhakti Vinod Thakur says, the effect of chanting the holy name is immediate, what is immediate?
Very nice point. What is immediate, Prabhu, is the start of the process of cleansing the heart. That is immediate. So in other words, the process that appears to be gradual, that process is immediately executed when we start devotional service. In other words, when we take up devotional service, that whole process of cleansing the heart begins. There's no waiting. There's no delay. There's no delay. So, the delay is never there. But it is a process. And process by definition means that it has to go through phases. And that is why the word gradual is there. But the beauty of this process is as the process goes on, the goal and the destination are the same. So it's not that we have to wait for the process to end for us to feel self-satisfied, peaceful and connected. The moment we start the process, Atma Prasada starts actually. And that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness, which nothing in this material world can do. In material world, when you start the journey, it is gradual, but it is the end that is what we are going for. But in Bhakti, when we start the journey, it is immediate start. And the effects of all that comes gradually, the process immediately starts. So whatever comes gradually is as sweet as the end. Pratapa was feeling sweetness even in separation from Mahaprabhu because gradually all the pure devotees were giving him association. And so while his heart was gradually being cleansed, it was still a perfectly self-satisfying experience. Is that helpful to you? Very nice point. So actually it's almost simultaneously one and different. Right? And that's why it is spiritual life. Very nice question. Yes,
I think I lost track of the words. I think it was 50-20 from Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
So, at one point, Prabhupada is saying that the devotional process is going to give you mystic power. He actually never talks about it. So,
sorry, again, Prabhu?
That the devotional process will give you mystic power, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't go on to say that, right?
Yeah, but then he never talks about mystic power. So
Yeah.
why is he referring this?
Okay, are you saying why he's referring then to mystic power when he doesn't talk about it?
Because he never says that we should be pursuing it.
Yeah, it's a good point. The reason why he's saying that is to establish that devotional service is very complete. Even those who want mystic power, they don't have to go anywhere if they come up to Bhakti. The only difference is that when they take up devotional service, they do stays for the mystic power. So it is stated very often that devotional service is like a complete set. And devotees can obtain mystic power, they can obtain potency, they can obtain vibhuti if Krishna wants. They can do amazing things because of devotional service. But because the devotee is not so much enamored by mystic power, it doesn't become very important. So Prabhupada, by stating it, at once declares that mystic powers are a subset. And in one sense, they come without separate endeavor when one takes up Bhakti. But the devotee is not interested in this. Is that helpful, Prabhu? It's a good point. Yes, Ranjan. Sorry? Oh, okay.
Harekrishna. In the verse we are discussing today, the purport Srila Prabhupada explains how mercy of the Lord can be obtained through the association of pure devotees. And you also mentioned that mercy of pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada is easily available if we approach him through his books. And you mentioned that the reading of the books is so potent that itself can give us pure bhakti. But we also see that sometimes when we are hearing from Prabhupada or reading, we sometimes do it in the middle of the hour while doing some other task where our attention is half attention. Or we also do it with some prejudice that we are going through a certain situation, so our mind is absorbed in that and we try to get solution to that with prejudice in our mind, that what I want out of it. Or sometimes we take part of it and it is favorable to what our conception is, and we leave aside what is difficult or what we don't fully agree with. So in this way, is it that we are not fully realizing the potency of the association of the pure devotee? And if we have to realize the full potency, how should we approach Srila Prabhupada's books or his classes?
Very nice point. We should approach Srila Prabhupada's books without motive. We should not find something there to support our conclusions, our arguments, because then we are becoming intellectual. But if we approach it without material desires, but really praying the way Pratap Rudra approached the devotees, that somehow or another we want pure devotional service. If we approach Srila Prabhupada that way, Srila Prabhupada will guide us very clearly. But then again, Prabhu, devotional service is so powerful that even if you come to Krishna with so many different motives, Krishna, through the association of devotees, will actually purify us too. That's the beauty of it. It is stated by Prabhupada that a blind uncle is better than no uncle. Right? So, even though devotional service you are limping along with crutches, it's still better than no devotional service. So, it's a spectrum, you see. Like yesterday, how Swami Prakash stated, it's a spectrum. So, at the beginning of the spectrum is when we come to Krishna with all this dirt. But devotional service is so powerful, it will cleanse it. But if we don't come to Krishna and say, let me be totally pure and come, we'll never make it. So, better we enter the door and then get cleansed. That's why Gundicha Marjan is important. Gundicha is pure, but it needed to be cleansed. The devotees had to enter, and therefore they could clean it. So we have to enter through the doors of devotional service. We must continue reading, but gradually it will change us. If we try to cheat Krishna, as Swami Prakash pointed out, Krishna will eventually cheat us. And that's a good cheating actually. Diti wanted to cheat Kashyap by extracting from him the vow that he would be able to give her a son that would kill Indra. But because Kashyapa had devotional service in his heart, he turned it around and he cheated her to take the vow for the very purposes of which she was actually opposed to. And finally she became purified and she became a devotee. So we may always start on the wrong foot, but it doesn't matter. Eventually, by the mercy of the Acharyas and Krishna, the wrong foot will become the right foot. But we have to start. Is that okay, Prabhu? Thank you very much for your time, Prabhus and Matajis, and I really hope that you keep coming for this morning program. It's so nice to see the hall full. Today, in COVID restriction, this is considered full. So we're very happy to see this. It's the new normal. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki.